Hello and welcome back to the Multiply Podcast. We are so glad to be here with you. Today is going to be a great day. I want to introduce who I have with me today. I have our lead pastor, Bryan.
Hello.
Yes, finally doing something besides preaching.
Finally.
Yeah,
Yes.
we always say, all you do is preach.
Yeah. John loves to say that.
Yeah,
I'm still trying to figure out what you do, though.
Everybody is. I'm like one of those guys with the clear business card.
There you go.
No one really knows. Yeah.
That means Marshall and I get to fill it in whenever we want.
Right.
That is true. Yeah. And speaking of, we do have Marshall joining us as well. Marshall,
Howdy, y'all.
I'm pretty sure you're the newest staff member, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would say
kind
so.
of the rookie. There may be a couple of others after you,
others
but
after me, but yeah.
you're definitely the newest at this table.
That's true.
And so there
Very
will be
much so.
some hazing going on. But
Good.
we call Marshall the DSOP.
That's me.
The DSOP, the Director of Strategy and Operations. And so we're so glad to have you with us today. As you guys already know, we are in the midst of our Multiply campaign that God is using to get a new campus going in the DeRidder area. We're going to call that Campus First North, and it's just a really exciting time. This is the first step to carrying out our multi-site vision that we're going to have over the next few years for First Moss Bluff. And it's really, the main point is we're looking to multiply what God is already doing here through the work of First Moss Bluff. And so recently here on the Multiply podcast, we've been diving into the details of the Multiply campaign. And that is actively going on right now with our church. And so last week we talked about, what the campaign is about and what it's for. And this week, we're going to look to answer some questions that you may have, and like some questions, some of the more frequently asked questions that we've gotten as we've kind of gone through this. And before we get into that, I kind of want to give Marshall a chance. Since you're joining us for the first time, last week I asked Bubba and Bryan, what they were most excited about so far in the process. And so I want to ask you the same thing. What have you seen God do so far that has you really fired up about starting the First North Campus?
Well, as mentioned, I'm kind of young here at the church and have only been here since December.
That's the only time we can call you young, by the way.
Exactly, it is, yeah. So, but I'm just really excited about just the vision of multi-site. I mean, it was one of the reasons I was brought on board, and I'm excited to be part of it. Seeing the Lord just let things unfold, whether it is the property or it's, and we'll talk about this a little bit more later, people pretty much every week saying, hey, we're from up there in the DeRidder area, or we have family, or we know some folks that I really think they would connect with, with First North once it's planted. So I'm just excited to see what God's doing.
Yeah, and that's been a common answer for a lot of us, because we expected that, I think, but we didn't expect it to be how it has been.
Yeah.
It's been really crazy to watch. And so we're excited about what's going on. But today we do want to answer some of those questions, because our goal is to have everybody, really informed through the process so that you can make good, wise decisions about how you want to be a part of what's going on here. And so, Bryan, let's dive in our question. I want to start with you. One of the things that we get a lot is, why do we need to go multi-site? Why can't we just work to make First Moss Bluff, like here in Moss Bluff, better, here on our campus?
Yeah, and that's a great question. I mean, it shows genuine concern and care for our church, for our church as a whole.
Yeah.
And I think there's a couple things to think about. First of all, I think anytime we follow Jesus in mission, we are going to make ourselves better.
Yeah.
Just that simple act of obedience. Jesus, this is following the Great Commission of go, make disciples, teach them to obey everything I've taught you, and I am with you always. And I want to be where Jesus is with me always. And then also Acts 1:8 that go into Jerusalem, Samaria, and all the way to the ends of the earth. So this is what I see. The vision is sort of, we're reaching our Jerusalem, and we'll continue to do so, being Moss Bluff. But this is our move into the Samaria of going into all the different regions that are around us and into those places where we've not yet been able to make as much impact. And again, at the same time, none of this is to the neglect of our current campus. We will continue to grow, to move, to expand when necessary and when we need to. And I know some people say, well, why don't we just, expand our current campus because we're out of space now? And kind of one thing I might ask is, come to the 8 o'clock. There's lots of space.
There's plenty of room.
There's plenty of room. There's people there, of course.
Sure,
we've got about 230, 250 in the worship center.
And it's been a really special time.
And
with
it's been
those
a great
people.
time.
It's been
Yeah. The
awesome.
services have been really impactful. The Lord has shown up, done some great things, and will continue to do so. So, but if you're someone who's like, I can't ever find a parking spot, there's no, some of those things, well, come to the 8.
Yes.
Because there's all kinds of space at that point for those things. So, but again, none of this will be to the neglect
Yes.
of First Moss Bluff and being in the Moss Bluff area. We're going to continue to reach, to expand, and to see God to do amazing things here.
Yeah, I mean, I think, one of the things that is probably going to be a theme throughout these questions is that it can be both and.
Absolutely.
It's not one or the other. We're not making decisions.
And part of that is, and I can fall into this very easily, is we get into this scarcity mentality of like, well, God's only got so much.
Right.
But I have to break out of that mentality of, no, God owns everything. God can do anything.
That's right.
I don't want to limit him by what he can do. So I do have to constantly rethink that scarcity mentality that I can fall into very easily.
Yeah, we actually have a discipleship podcast. It may be out already by the time you watch this, or it is coming out on generosity, where we actually talk a little bit about that.
Yeah.
And so make sure you check that podcast out too. But, as we're doing that, another question that comes up, Marshall, is, if we're going to do this, and we are, it started, man, the process is rolling. We got some things going. How do we keep from losing what makes this church special as we expand to more campuses? Because, we love our church, and we want it to be kind of like the same thing. And so how do we do that?
Well, at the risk of, for several reasons, the risk of sounding like a Sunday school answer, the first is basically the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
No, seriously, that, as one church, multiple locations, which is the vision, that one church, the Lord will enable that, because that's the mindset that we're bringing to it. But beyond that, kind of more practical in some ways, is the fact that you got a campus pastor who has been a leader in the church, has been here, has been involved.
Shout out Bubba.
Yeah, shout out to Bubba. He's going to bring with himself a core team that many of them have been leaders in the church and are familiar with the culture and the DNA, and they're anxious to take it.
Yes.
And into First North, into the building of that church. So those are really the ways. And plus, as a staff, just our whole vision of, okay, it's one church. We're one church.
That's right.
And maintaining that mindset.
Continuing to reinforce that, and the fact that we're all working together.
Yep.
All of us are serving both campuses, maybe some more than others, right, at one campus or the other. But we're all, in this together. We're rowing in the same boat.
That's right.
And so, speaking of one church, multiple campuses, I think both of y'all can kind of speak to this a little bit. One thing what people want to know is this new campus going to feel like ours? What ministries will be involved? And so, Bryan, speak to, is it going to feel like here?
It will, but to scale. So that word to scale is very important. So of course, it won't be our current, worship space is 36,000 square feet.
Right.
The new building we're looking at is anywhere between 10 to 14,000 square feet. So it's going to be that's going to be smaller. So that's what I mean by to scale. So, but that doesn't mean like culture, DNA, worship experience, like that kind of feel of what we experience at First Moss Bluff is going to be any different. So a couple of the ways we've talked about how to understand this is Disney World and Disneyland. They're very different they're the same, but different to scale. So Disney World is huge. You got this big, all this big palace, and Shay and I, my wife and I, we've been to both. And so when you look down Main Street, you see Center, and at Disney World, it's amazing. It's huge and big. And then you go to Disneyland and you look down Main Street and it's like, well, that's different. Yeah. So, and not everybody's been to those places, so that might not register, but it's the same. It's still the same culture of Disney, be that what it may, but it's to scale. Another maybe sort of local one that that we've talked about is it's Steamboat Bills on the Lake and Steamboat Bills on Broad. Yeah, the DNA is the same. That's right. But it's to scale. It's different. But still, it's the same good food, same some of the great environment, but a little bit of a different feel to it.
Yeah, and I'd rather the one on Broad.
Okay.
Me too.
I think most people would say that.
I'm never going to turn down fried shrimp, though.
No, I hear you. I completely get that. I think the main thing for us to remember is that when you walk in, it's going to feel like First.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? It'll be First North, but it's going to feel like First. And that's because we are doing everything possible to translate DNA, to translate culture, translate, how it feels when you walk into Kidman here. We're going to translate that there. It's just going to feel a little different because it's going to be smaller. At
Just
first.
the physical building.
Yeah, just the physical building. And so, but we know it's going to be awesome. But I think also kind of going along with this question is, all right, so is it just going to be worship? What are we going to do for kids? Marshall, can you kind of speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, we're gonna have Kidman there, and once again to scale, but very much like what we have here at the Moss Bluff campus. We're gonna have student ministry as well, of course, once again to scale, and then we're gonna have small group, basically small groups. Those are the primary disciple ministries, and then of course we're gonna have worship service. On Sunday. So
and those are gonna be like awesome, right? And we know how important those questions are to families. And as we were doing this, as we were kind of planning, we were really thinking about, all right, what is a family looking for when they're looking for a church? Because that's kind of who we're designed to reach is families, right? And so that's what we're looking for is what was a family looking for, and we know that those ministries are needed. But Marshall kind of mentioned worship is definitely going to be a part of, obviously what we're doing over there. But Bryan, so this question kind of comes directly to you. How are we going to do worship and preaching? Who's going to do it? What is it going to look like?
Yeah, and that's a great question because that's very important to translating the DNA and the culture and the feel of the church. So we've talked about Pastor Seth. He's going to be the worship pastor up there, and so he'll be leading a live worship that will be replicated. He and Blake will work closely together. It'll be the same songs, the same set, if you will, that they're doing, and a lot of the same feel on the worship side. So,
and Seth has probably been around as long or longer than anyone else on our staff.
Yeah,
at least
I think since birth.
Yeah, right. So
yeah,
pretty much.
And he's tremendous, amazing.
So he's in the culture.
Yeah, God's gifted him. Yeah, he is literally going to be able to take the culture of First and bring it to First. I mean, he has seen it his whole life. So, and then after worship, when it Bubba will be involved in that from the platform, casting vision and giving people things. But when it comes to preaching, that will be simulcast. So there'll be a screen simulcast from the First Moss Bluff campus. So whomever is preaching at the First Moss Bluff campus will be simulcast up to First North. And so one of the main things when we say that people say is, well, nobody's going to want to watch the screen. Right. And there's a couple of things.
That's the fear that's out there.
Correct. Yeah. And I can understand that because that was my first thought as well when I really, a year and a half ago began to think about this. Like, I don't know if anybody's going to watch the screen. So I began to think about it, look at what other people have to say about that. And so a couple of things to say. First of all, in our everyday life, screens, we look at screens all the time.
Yeah, I'm looking at one right now.
You're looking at one right now. YouTube is one of the most watched things out there. We're always looking at screens. And even a lot of people are watching like live streams. I mean, that's a big thing right now, you know.
Right.
So we're always looking at screens. Screens are just a part of our life. But a second thing is when you do the research on this, the data just doesn't suggest that people resist this.
That's right.
The data more suggests that those churches who plant a campus with video, simulcast video from the main campus, are the ones who are the most effective at reaching those who are far from God.
When I saw that, it just encouraged me so much for the direction we were going.
Right, and so that was huge. So from a just thinking about it from a data standpoint, statistical standpoint, that was massive for us. As we were thinking back and forth. And then the last one is just very, very practical. I mean, my experience on Sunday is preaching at First over here in Moss Bluff. And when I try to make eye contact with people, y'all might not know, but it's very hard to make eye contact with people because they're not looking at me. Yeah. They're looking over my shoulders at the two big screens to where I'm, up there on the screens. Yeah. So just pay attention to your own habits. Yeah. Most of the time, I think 75, 85% of the time, if not 100% of the time, you're watching the screen, even at Moss Bluff.
I know for myself, I can be sitting right in front of him, and I'm still watching the screen.
So I try to make eye contact with people like the first 2 or 3 rows, and they're not looking at me. They're looking at the screen.
But hey, be aware. Bryan needs a little love. He needs you to look into his eyeballs every now and then.
Yeah.
So that's something that we definitely, it's just the actual data doesn't back up the fear, and so we want to make sure. But speaking to that.
Well, go ahead.
Let
me add something to that. Just kind of back to the question about what would kind of keep the culture of First Moss Bluff. How will we continue to have that culture up at First North?
Yeah,
that's also a major.
You're right.
Means of that is the fact that everyone, both campuses, will be hearing the same sermon, the same pastor.
That's right.
The small groups from both the DeRidder area and Moss Bluff area, they're going to be discussing the same sermon.
That's right.
So that kind of helps maintain that
one church.
Yep. Yeah, and to know that Bryan is our lead pastor
Yes.
of First.
Yep.
No matter how many campuses we have,
Right.
Bryan is our lead pastor, and we are listening to him, we're learning from him, and that sort of thing. But each campus, for the North Campus, they will have their own campus pastor,
right.
and his name's Bubba Sharpton.
That's right.
We love him when he's not around. When he is around, we
Yeah,
may
we
not
give
be
him a
so
hard time,
lovey-dovey.
yeah.
But
Oh, come on. We love that guy.
But Marshall, can you kind of tell us a little bit more? You mentioned it a little while ago, but maybe a little bit more about what will Bubba's role be up there as the campus pastor?
He will be the campus pastor, and we take that title very seriously.
Yes, sir.
He is going to be the primary ministry equipper
Yes.
on the ground there. He will be overseeing the discipleship processes on the ground. He will be the shepherd of that local expression of First Moss Bluff. So, and, known as First North. So
That's awesome. I love it. And so the one question to kind of move into location, and this will be the last few questions. Why DeRidder? Southwest Louisiana has a lot of different towns, a lot of different cities. Why do we go with DeRidder for the first one?
Well, the simple answer is that's really where the Lord has led us to go first. But I can give a little background on that. Even when I first was talking to Bryan before I came, he had mentioned kind of his heart and his vision was, as we go to a multi-site, as First Moss Bluff moves to a multi-site, going north was kind of his heart. Mm-hmm. And as we began that process of looking and where to go, one of the first things we kind of looked into maybe the Longville area. We even considered South Bow, the school, to see if we could use the facilities, weekly, come in, set up, have the worship service there. The Lord didn't open that door. It didn't work out. Yeah. And we had looked a little bit in DeRidder for some potential places to meet. And I can say just from my own experience, when we were doing that, I kept thinking to myself, I think this is where we need to be. And even as we were considering where we would kind of launch the first campus, what the location would be, I also had kind of in the back of my mind the idea that because this is our first campus as other campus as a church, and First Moss Bluff is not as familiar with that model, I thought, it'd be really good to have some kind of permanent facility to be for our first other campus.
Right.
And the Lord just began to move, and He worked some things out. The property to me is just a great example of where
huge
where the Lord would have
one of those
us,
flashing
doors
signs.
open.
Right?
Oh, yeah, it was like hey, plant here, launch here.
Yeah.
But then also, just in terms of ministry fields being white for the harvest. Yeah, you might think, well, there's a lot of churches in that area in Beauregard Parish. Yeah, but if you look at the statistics, there's about 36,000 people in Beauregard Parish on any given Sunday. Generously, about 5,000 of them are in a church.
Yeah, right.
Well, that means there's 31,000 people that are unchurched in the parish. And so there is plenty of room for ministry. Not only that, God uses different types of churches to reach different types of people.
Absolutely.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I know John can speak a little bit more too from a database perspective.
Yeah, that was one thing that we really saw too, is that we knew we had tons of families connected to us from that northern area, and that's why Bryan, I think, was really looking to that north and also being led by the Spirit. And so it was just became really clear. And then over the we mentioned this at the beginning of the podcast, as people are coming, it's more and more clear. This is it.
Yeah, even last night, I don't know when this will air, but we had services last night, and after the service, a young lady approached me and she said, "Hey, I've told Pastor," she called you Louvier, which is awesome. Yeah. So I've told him this story, but I wanted to let you know this story. She said, I was driving, I live in DeRidder. I was driving, my husband goes to work very early, and so I was driving back very early in the morning, going up north back towards home, and she said, and I know exactly where the property is, and she said, as the sun was rising on it, and it's kind of just like a sunrise cast over the property, the Lord just, as in my car, said, "This is where you're going to serve me."
That's right.
And That's amazing. That's what it's all
How
about.
incredible.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Right. Yeah.
You know? So that was a blessing. She blessed me last night being able to tell me that story.
And we've heard multiple stories like that of people praying and wanting something like this up there. But Bryan, one question that we do have, especially from people maybe from the DeRidder area is, there's already a lot of churches. So why not help another church rather than start another campus?
Yeah, and that's I can appreciate that question very much so. So a couple of things. Number one, we do help. We do help churches that contact us. There's a pastor up in the Beauregard Parish whom I meet with whenever he requests and asks and calls me. Our staff, anytime anybody makes a request, any church that asks us to help them, we go out of our way. We will set other things aside to help them. And so we do currently do that. However, I would say, like we said earlier, this is a both and. Again, we've got to get out of the scarcity mindset of if First North is there, well, that's gonna harm other churches, and that's not the case.
We actually believe it'll help. We're all working together.
Yeah,
right?
And so I'm gonna, and I'll speak to this I have talked to other pastors who are up there, and literally, one of them told me, he's like, y'all being here does not hurt. If God wants these churches to be here, these are His churches.
That's right.
They're all going to be here, and that's from Him. That's not me saying that, but He literally said that. So I've talked to pastors up there. They're the ones I've talked with. They're great. I mean, it's like, this is going to be wonderful. Many churches, we need to keep reaching people. It's all about the kingdom.
That's right.
So and again, we just have to understand God is not limited, and we don't need to put a limitation on Him.
Amen.
Our church being there doesn't limit what He can do in our church or in any other church, because He's the God of the universe. He can do exactly as He pleases. And we will continue to help. We will continue to offer assistance. We will continue to offer any type of help and assistance that we can to any church that asks us. But again, we're going to do both and.
And we're also going to partner.
Absolutely.
We're looking to partner with churches. We do that here in the Moss Bluff area a lot. Our student ministry has something called United, where for Impact Weekend and other events throughout the year, they're partnering with multiple churches from the area. Yep. And so we're looking to do that same thing up there. We have a mind for the kingdom. That's what we're all about.
That's what we do. I mean, and we do that here in Moss Bluff, and we'll do it up there. I mean, just like our worship night where we shared, with WRC in that. Pastor Andy and I got together, and the Lord led that, and it was a beautiful night where two churches coming together, and we will do all of those same things.
Those are my favorite nights, by the way.
Yeah. And it's been beautiful. It's the kingdom.
Yeah.
And we will continue to do all of that same thing, because that's our heart. I love the local church. I don't want to see any local church go away. I love the local church, and we're going to do everything we can to help sustain every local church that's there.
All right. So our final question, and the one that may be hardest to answer, is when? When are we getting this? When is it happening?
And that's a great question. So everybody, dates are wonderful, and we would love to put dates. And so, but we hold dates with an open hand. Yeah. And I think that's what we have to do, is hold dates with an open hand. So we have goals that we've got to hit, milestones that we got to hit along the way. And it's kind of like taking a trip, like going from here to Houston. It's like, well, I got to get to Beaumont first.
Right.
And then and eventually you'll hit Houston. And so for us, kind of a loose date is October, November next year, depending on, weather, building, construction processes, and those types of things. So, and along the way, there's milestones, core group, launch team. One of the milestones was bringing Pastor Bubba on board. That was a huge milestone that we knew we needed right at the very beginning to establish that and to help people understand that. So we're going to continue to reach those milestones. And when we hit the final milestone, the doors will open. And again, hold this with an open hand, but October, November-ish is kind of what we've been told.
And we absolutely can't wait.
That's right.
We are so excited about what God is doing. And so we hope that this has been a help for all of you. If you've been wondering about any of these questions that we've answered today, and maybe you have some other questions that we didn't answer. If so, drop those questions in the comments. We'll get back to you, and we'll do our best to answer them. You can also visit our Multiply website for tons of resources and just information about what is going on. That's going to be linked in the description, so make sure you visit that website. But with all of that said, there's probably one major question that you have that we purposely didn't answer in this podcast, and that is, how can I get involved? what can I do personally? And so the reason we didn't answer that is because we have another podcast coming that is completely devoted to that question. And so make sure you look for that podcast. It's going to be dropping next week. And so we want to thank you for being a part. I thank you guys for being here with us. And thank all of you for listening. And we'll see you next time on the Multiply Podcast.
See you next time.
Peace.